and here's a bit more of Matchmakers. When they arrived at the hospital, the doctor took them into his office to update them on both Charlie and Leanne's conditions. Dr. Everhart was a kindly-looking man in his late 40s. Deep blue eyes looked out of thick-rimmed glasses. He was at least a few inches shorter than Mitch and had a slight nervous tic. Young Charlie is showing signs of regaining consciousness. Leanne, I'm afraid, is still in a coma, and at the moment the machine is breathing for her. I'm afraid the longer this goes on, the more worried we get. Jane jumped out of her seat, tears spilling down her eyes. If you think we're giving up and letting her die, you can forget it, Aunt. Mitch put a calming hand on her shoulder. I know it seems hard. We're running some more tests this afternoon. We'll know more then, said the doctor kindly. He was used to upset friends and relatives and didn't take offence in the slightest to Jane's emotional outburst. The doctor showed them out and they went to see Charlie. Gently stroking his hair with her fingers, she let out a small cry of surprise when the child began to reach up his hand and cry a little. Taking the boy's hand gently, she ran her thumb over the palm. Hello, Charlie. You've been a poor, sickly boy, but you're going to be all right now. A few days later, Charlie was well enough to leave hospital. Jane volunteered to take him in and look after him. Mitch took some much overdue time off work and helped out when Jane couldn't be there. They took it in turns to visit Leanne, while the other would look after Charlie. 3 weeks went by without a change in Leanne's condition. The tests that had been carried out indicated the possibility of minor brain damage, but as Dr. Everhart was apt to say, nobody could know for sure until Leanne woke up. Jane was sat by Leanne's bed, talking gently. Come on, love. You have to wake up. Charlie misses his mum. So do I. Mitch has been so good looking after him. You have to be there for the wedding. Jane began to cry, the tears soaking into the sheet on the bed. Now, contrary to what one is led to believe via dramatised serials and soap operas, coming out of a coma does not happen all at once, but rather in stages, gradually. And so it was when exactly 3 weeks and 3 days after the accident, both Mitch and Jane were visiting along with Charlie for once. Jane was holding one of Leanne's hands. By now the bruising and swelling was going down, and she was even getting a normal pallor back. While Jane was softly talking to her, she was sure she felt the hand move. Trying to convince herself she was imagining things for a moment, but no, there it was again. Mitch, see that? She moved her hand. I think she's going to be all right. However, Jane was disappointed when nothing else seemed to happen. The doctor reassured her that it was perfectly normal and that it would simply take time. A few days later, Mitch was visiting alone. Jane had Charlie and Mitch had just sat down when he heard footsteps and a familiar voice spoke. Well, look, what have we here, baby brother? He whirled round to see his older brother standing in the doorway, a smirk on his face. Get out of here right now or I'll have someone escort you out, growled Mitch, moving closer to Frank. What is it? Asked Frank, still wearing that stupid smirk he had come in with. Anyone would think you're not pleased to see me. Grabbing him by the collar, Mitch spat out, You got that right. What the hell are you doing here? To cause more trouble? Can't you see you've done enough? Mitch had Frank pinned against the wall, only letting him go when a nurse appeared to see what was happening. Sir, be quiet or I'm going to have to throw you both out, said the nurse, an agitated expression on her face. Mitch, still scowling, let his brother go, instead tugging on his arm and pulling him towards the cafeteria, ignoring the surprised look on nurses' and visitors' faces alike. When at last they were sat at a table with cups of coffee, and Mitch had had a few minutes to calm down, Frank Adams, at 6'3", was 3 inches taller than Mitch, broader and lighter skinned with mousy brown hair, but instead of Mitch's sparkling, full of life hazel eyes, Frank's in contrast were a cold grey, almost like steel. All right, how much to disappear and claw back onto that rock you came out of? Mitch was stirring sugar into his coffee. Frank looked up, apparently surprised by the question. How much? Oh, little brother, I don't think you understand. You haven't got enough money to buy me off, and I'm taking Charlie. You see if I don't." Mitch got a checkbook out of his pocket. 50,000 do it, to drop the suit and disappear. Frank leaned in closer. "Make it 60 and you're on." Mitch was surprised. This was too easy. Then he remembered Frank Adams was fond of money, even more fond of spending it. He must be in some financial trouble to agree to drop everything so readily. Then a thought struck him. He had been about to sell Charlie. Had he been about to sell Charlie to a childless couple or something? Yes, that must be it. And if it wasn't it had to be pretty damn close to the truth. Mitch narrowed his eyes suspiciously. "And why would you be giving up your son so easily?" Frank looked at him and said it in all seriousness. "Your offer was the more attractive." He smiled and took another sip of coffee. Mitch didn't want to know what the other offer might have been. Giving the cheque to Frank, he stood up. "That's a cheque for 60,000 and a bit more besides. Now turn up here again and I'll knock your block off, sunshine." Frank also stood up and said coldly, "Don't worry about me darkening your doorstep again. Thanks for this, Mitchell." Mitch watched as his brother slowly stalked out of the cafeteria and out of the hospital. Out of his life too, if he knew what was good for him, he thought with a scowl. The money he had just given his brother was money he had been saving ever since he left college. His job paid well, and he had accumulated a tidy sum. What was there, though, had been put aside for the wedding now. He hoped Jane wouldn't be angry with him for giving his brother money allocated for their wedding. Still, it was for a good cause. He shuddered to think what might have happened if Frank had got his hands on the boy. Sometimes you have to give life a little push in the right direction to get back on track. Mitch had stayed a while longer with Leanne. There was no significant change in her condition. It was so weird to see her. To all intents and purposes, she was simply asleep. After 2 hours, he stretched and yawned. He really should get going. His thoughts wandered back to his brother. It really wasn't that he was a bad person. Rather, he seemed to have some sort of allergy to responsibility, and strange as that sounded, he knew it to be true. He had seen it several times while they were growing up and as young men. Pulling up outside Jane's flat on Scotland Road, he took himself from his gloom and knocked on the door. Jane answered. "No change," said Mitch wearily as he stepped in. Looking round and seeing no sign of Charlie, he asked, "Where's the little fella?" asked Mitch, looking round. Jane looked confused. "Frank came to take Charlie out for a walk. He said that you knew all about it, that he'd asked you if it was all right." Mitch looked panicked for a moment before grabbing Jane by the shoulders and shaking her. "How stupid can you get? I just gave money to Frank to get lost. I was sure he was up to no good. You idiot! How could you just give Charlie to him like that?" Jane was taken aback by the physical and verbal onslaught. Narrowing her eyes, she quickly retorted. "How dare you?" She glowered at him. "How the hell was I supposed to know? Don't you dare speak to me like that again." "Fine, suits me," came Mitch's reply as he headed for the door. "How about I don't talk to you at all?" With that, the door shut with a slam. Jane sank down onto the couch. What the hell had just happened?